Hello everyone, Colin Cadet here for Woodwork Web. Today we're going to make a little keepsake or jewelry box and we're going to put a special top on it, and I think you'll recognize it when we come to it. But right now I've got some nice thick lumber and we need to go over to the table saw and start trimming it up. I've preset the teeth on the table saw to be a half tooth over the material, and I've set the distance to be 5 inches. We're ready to go. Next, I need to cut the sides, and in this case, I'm only going to cut them to a rough length. I've moved back to the table saw because I want to make some precision 45-degree cuts, and you can see I'm using my engineer square to make sure I've got that blade at absolutely perfect 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to use my square in the miter slot to line up my miter gauge here to make sure that it's absolutely perfectly square to the blade. So what I'm going to do now is make one cut on each of the sides, then we'll line them up later on. Okay, let me show you what I've done now. I've attached this board and I've used some screws on the back of my miter gauge. It's now become my temporary fence. This part here is the stop, and when I bring this board over and touch that and run this through the saw, I can now cut both of these at exactly the same length. There you can see all of those pieces. These two are exactly the same length, and so are those. So in theory, they should go together perfectly. Let's have a look and see what they look like. Well, they were sliding around a bit, so I put them on my 45-degree or my 90-degree setup table. But you can see we've got nice tight joints on all 4 sides. And the next thing we need to do now is to glue these all together. That's done. Let's take the clamps off. The next thing we need to do is to cut a rabbet on the inside so we'll have a place to glue the bottom to. Before we get started, here's a little trick. You notice that inside I've glued a little strip along all the insides. That's because my rabbeting bit digs in too deep and I can't adjust it anymore. So I've just put this temporary strip in here just with some hot melt glue, and that'll give a perfect depth for what I want. And there's that rabbit, and you can see how it's rounded over in the corners. I'm going to need to take my chisel and we'll square that off there. Now, we've purposely not installed the bottom in here because we want to have access to the top. And for those of you who have been following my channel for a while, you'll remember that we got some spalted wood quite a few videos ago, and this is one of our first chances to really start putting it to use. So now I need to glue the splines in, and they're just basically thin pieces of wood that fit in there. Normally I cut these to fit, but this time I did something a little bit different. I took some veneers that I had and I sandwiched them together. So there are those two laminations. This is the one I'm going to use, the dark, light, dark. And I've never done this before. I'm not sure if they're going to show up by time we get them in here, whether you're actually going to be able to see them or not, but we'll give it a whirl. A nice sweeping arc on all of those. I'll put that up there so you can see that. And that's what those arches look like. The next thing we need to do now is to bring that over to the bandsaw, and we'll cut those all off. So there's what our box looks like, and I was interested to see what the splines, the laminated splines, and you can actually see them quite nicely. They stand out quite nicely. And the next thing I need to do now is to go and do some sanding on all of these sides. Well, we're making good progress on our box here. There's 3 coats of Osmo, and you can see the front is looking just great. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to put some flocking on the inside. And it's basically like a fine material, like a ground up material. But the very first thing we do is we apply this green paint, special green paint. So I'm going to put that everywhere. And then when I've applied that, then we have a special applicator that looks like this, and it's got some holes in it, and I've put some flocking in here, and this part actually moves back and forth, and I have plastic around here so that we can recover as much of this that's oversprayed. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and we'll let you watch all of this. Well, there's our finished little box. I'm really happy the way the splines turned out, the laminated splines. They really do show up quite nicely, and the curved sides. The other thing I did to lift this box up off what it's sitting on, I went to a hobby store and I was able to buy little wooden balls. I guess they're beads, and they're perfect for making little feet like this. I love the design of this little box, but now you can learn from a couple of my mistakes that I made on here. And the first one is the lid it doesn't really, well, it's staying up now, but it doesn't really stay up nicely. You can see that it's at a little bit of a frontward angle. And the reason for that, I put the pins a little bit too close to the back. If you move the pins to about a ½ inch or even 3/4 of an inch, it will allow that lid to stay up. And that's not something I considered when I was making this. So it's something I could fix, but if you can prevent it altogether, even better. The other thing that I did, you'll notice when I did the flocking on the back, I left it bare at the back, and it's a little tight all the way around. And also, if you look closely, you can kind of see the flocking in here, and I don't really like that. So what I would do, and what I'll do when I get some time, is I will etch along the inside there, and I can scrape that flocking off and refinish it. It's a little bit extra work, but I think it'll make the box look even better. Well, and that concludes our video for today, and even some tips on some of the things that I didn't do quite right, that if you make this box, you'll be able to do an even better job. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, we ask you to do that. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, all that good stuff. I'm Colin Cadet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.